Hymns House, Episode 6. I'm Jonathan Stern. I'm here with Lewis Stevens and Dr. H. Today we're going to explore operations at Hims, key partnerships, why it's important for Hims to own the compounding pharmacies, notable acquisitions, and more. To kick things off, Dr. H. Hims could not exist in its current form without partnerships with doctors, nurses, therapists, the healthcare providers. Take us through how this works from an insider's perspective. Would love to hear, how were you initially approached by Hims and why did you join?
Thanks, Jonathan. Well, it's the reverse, actually. I approached Hims based on one of their hiring posts. They're very much a tech company. So they would have job offerings and posts on the usual tech-based sites, Indeed, LinkedIn. Also, there's a pretty strong Facebook community with physicians who are interested in telemedicine. And the Hims does offer probably a small referral compensation for doctors who would recommend the job to other doctors to apply. It's not a big bonus. It's, I don't know, maybe $100 or something like that. Just a thank you, basically. So for the most part, people who are the doctors on Hims are generally pretty favorable with the position. They like it. It's satisfying to do as a side gig, maybe even full time. And the word of mouth kind of gets out in the community. So people will ask, what's Hims like? We'll give their honest feedback. And for the most part, it's a positive experience. But I joined just because I was looking for a forward-thinking company who's looking at healthcare and technology, combining the two in something that can provide some good patient care for people. I wanted to find something that I could do on the side in the meantime when I wasn't in clinic. And the whole onboarding process at that time was simple. The recruiters were welcoming. It was pretty straightforward. And it just seemed like a fun avenue to get into telemedicine. It's new. It's exciting. So that's why I got involved with it.
You said the onboarding process was simple. Can you say a little bit more?
It's simple as in it's not anything different than what you would do to get onboarded to other doctor positions. You're doing background checks, you're doing references, you're completing guideline training, you're meeting all the administrative people and know what their vision is. So it's just nothing different than what you're used to seeing when you've been in the medical world and are applying to different jobs. Lately, I've heard that it's a little bit slower to get everything sorted out for doctors to join initially. So, that's that.
In the realm of doctor autonomy, how much is there? How rigid are the Hims corporate guidelines and strictures? Take us through that.
All of the Hims guidelines are based in medicine too. So they'll have clinical guidelines that they will spell out pretty clearly of how they expect you to practice good, safe medicine, to think of the patient first. We're not incentivized to prescribe medicines. So we don't make more money if we prescribe 100 prescriptions. As a physician, we would get paid the same whether we deny a prescription to a customer or create a prescription for a customer. So that really takes the stress off. Hey, am I going to get dinged if I don't approve this person for a GLP-1, if I don't approve this other person for another medicine? And I've actually talked to management a few times when I was with them and just really going through, hey, I was worried about this one person. I ultimately said no to them. Am I going to get critically reviewed on it? And they said, no, we always want you to practice good, safe medicine. So that was a big thing, is just practicing medicine like you would in your own clinic. There is expectations of how you conduct yourself. There's periodic chart reviews. They'll just gather X amount of your charts, 15, 20 patient encounters through the course of several weeks, and just make sure you're hitting all your expectations of, are you communicating clearly with the patient? Did you answer their questions appropriately? Did you give them a chance to ask more questions? Did you do the right treatment? And if there's any issues that they see, opportunity to remediate or just address any of those issues before anything severe happens, like if you get let go from Hims.
I think it's come up a few times that you're formerly in the Hims network. Take us through the last part of your time with Hims and why you ended up leaving.
Yeah, I was with Hims for several years, always very happy with working on Hims. I think I became one of the more efficient, high producing, seeing lots of patients on the platform. And at the time my contract was ended, I knew of other physicians who also had their contracts ended, and really wasn't a specific reason given. So it was a no cause termination of the contract. And on my exit interview, when I talked to certain parts of the management team, they really didn't see an issue, whether it was performance or anything like that. So it was suspected that it was mostly just a financial decision. This also happened around the same time when other providers or nurse practitioners were hired. So overall, I think it was an effort to possibly replace physicians who were high earning, high production with 2 or 3 equivalent nurse practitioners and paying a fraction of the operating expenses between the difference between a nurse practitioner and a physician. Overall, I have nothing bad to say about HIMSS from a physician standpoint, and I still enjoyed my time with HIMSS significantly.
I have a question on that, Dr. H. It seems like there's like an evolution underway. There's an evolution in terms of how HIMSS is ultimately providing care. Do you foresee this trend of less doctors and more nurse practitioners continuing? And then where might that go over time? Does AI become an even larger portion of how HIMSS operates? What's your perspective on what seems like an evolution?
I think this evolution is taking place in all aspects of medicine. You see it in in-person clinics. You see clinics that hire nurse practitioners, several nurse practitioners, and maybe 1 or 2 physicians. So it's happening throughout all aspects of the healthcare system. And it's a debate amongst physicians and nurse practitioners. It's kind of like a give and take. Physicians need help seeing patients, so we hire nurse practitioners. Nurse practitioners advocate for themselves and try to have greater management capabilities for patients. So it's not unique to HIMSS. I'm not surprised that HIMSS has, over time, tried to incorporate more nurse practitioners. I still feel like there's a balance, and there needs to be a nice mix of nurse practitioners and physicians for the overall flow and patient care to work well. But this is a discussion that permeates through the American healthcare systems. What's the role of nurse practitioners? Can a practice survive without extra help to the physician? And what's the best way to keep costs low?
And so you're practicing currently. Do you see AI reducing costs, creating greater efficiency? I mean, I feel like it's inevitable that AI will play a much larger role. I think some people even argue that ChatGPT alone, or I'll say Meta AI alone could just become a doctor itself and start writing prescriptions, in 10, 20, 30 years. What would you say to somebody that thinks that AI will totally replace doctors or totally replace nurse practitioners and physicians on the HIMSS or any digital healthcare platform?
As a physician myself, I hope I don't get replaced by AI, but I think there's definitely a role for AI to help make our lives easier. I think AI can help sort through data and point in the right direction of what's the newest research to help us make a medical decision. It could look at patient demographics and their medical history and say, hey, in 60% of this type of person, these types of medicines were most effective. And here's the studies and research to show it. So it could really help streamline data, large amounts of information to funnel and point us in the right direction of how we can then manage and care for this person. If there's some dystopian world in the future where all doctors are replaced by robots and AI, I don't think that will really happen. I think there will be a lot of advocacy on the physicians group and AMA and different things like that to really try to prevent that from happening. But I feel like there is certainly a role where AI can really be helpful.
I think the concept is the idea that capital is gaining more control, and just deploying capital will be able to create artificial labor, which will displace a lot of the workforce. I personally believe that a lot of the workforce is going to transition to space. I think that's going to be a massive growing industry over the next couple decades. Ultimately, in buying HIMSS and concurrently practicing, you're sort of acknowledging that capital is gaining control in some sense, or could, if AI continues to accelerate in the way that it has. I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but I think for software engineers, doctors, lawyers, who knows what the actual velocity of AI will be. And I remember, I think about a half decade ago, Sam Altman wrote a little article, and he basically asserted that capital is going to become the more dominant force in the battle between labor and capital. But I think, it's just an interesting idea as it relates to AI and technology, and HIMSS and AI are very much related. I really believe there's going to be creative destruction, but ultimately that's going to create new jobs. It's going to create new avenues for humans to be productive and to ultimately fulfill the mandate of whatever we're doing in this universe.
I'll just say I am a software engineer. I learned to code 3.5 to 4 years ago before ChatGPT. My job and the way that I work, what it means to be a software engineer, has been fundamentally transformed. Yes, some software engineers, what percentage of their code is written by AI? You hear various numbers. For me, upwards of 70, 80, 90%. And obviously, I'm looking at all of the code that's generated by an AI, and you run it to see if it works and iterate from there. But I'm 2 to 3 times faster, more efficient, and better. Like the quality of the code is simply far higher on account of having tools like ChatGPT and GitHub's Copilot. The experience is much more fun. The AI has not replaced me yet. I guess I'm a host of this podcast now, so maybe I won't be an engineer forever. But for now, the AI has simply made me 2 or 3 times better and faster and more efficient at my job. Perhaps there will come a time where it replaces me altogether, but that's at least the state of the world in software engineering. I could see a similar world in medicine at some point as well.
For some cases, from a patient standpoint, if the treatment option is not totally obvious, I see the world where the AI could help us interpret data and information and become more efficient. Am I going to spend 25 minutes sifting through the most recent medical research to see if one medicine is better than the other? If AI is able to pre-populate and gather this information for me, I can review it without spending that 25 minutes. It could be 5 minutes looking into this information rather than 30 minutes trying to find it.
I have 2 ideas. I think what Dr. H said, there's certainly efficiencies being wrung out of the entire process. And the number one player in the industry, it seems that it could achieve some kind of escape velocity where it's become so efficient and there's so much data being fed into the operations that there's a real competitive advantage that's developed over time. The funny joke that I wanted to share, Johnny, was that Sam Altman went to TSMC and he said that they needed to build $7 trillion of chip manufacturing plants or something crazy like that. And they laughed and called him a podcast bro. So maybe that's all of our fates, is just to be podcast bros and have fun hanging out while the AI and the AIs govern labor.
This is an operations episode, so I'm going to draw us back to another piece of the HIMSS puzzle, pharmacies. Said HIMSS is partnered with primary care physicians and doctors and nurses and therapists, but the pharmacies also make the HIMSS operation possible. First question, what is the difference between a 503A and a 503B pharmacy? I hear these terms being battered about in the Discord and various articles I read, but Dr. H, could you take us through what the difference between these types of pharmacies is?
Yeah, from a logistics standpoint, I think the most important thing that HIMSS investors want to know about is with a 503B pharmacy, it allows a company like HIMSS to make larger batches of the medicine. And if you do that, theoretically, you could drive costs lower. There's other rules and differences between the 503A and 503B, but the main thing that I think most people will be interested in is making bigger batches of the medicine and helping lower the expense side of producing these medicines. There's other differences in how they're regulated. So the 503A pharmacies, they are in accordance with the United States Pharmacopoeia, USP standards. They're regulated by the states. The 503B pharmacies are in accordance with the CGMP, which is good manufacturing practices, and they're regulated by the FDA, which a lot of people are interested in. Other differences, the 503A pharmacies usually have to make medicines on an individual basis. So you'll have patient-specific treatments, and then they'll make a small batch of the medicine. Due to that, they have shorter usage dates or expiration dates. A lot of the medicine sometimes need to be used within 30 days. When you have a 503B facility, they are submitted to other forms of testing. This also helps them have a longer expiration date. So you may be able to produce medicines that you can ship out, months at a time, and that can lower costs as well. So those are the key differences and why a company like Hims would be interested in having a 503B facility is it can really streamline the process of making the medicine. They can make the medicine beforehand instead of waiting for an actual prescription from a person to come through. They could just have this batch and produced. So you can see all the positive implications of having a 503B facility would be.
And I think coming back to the ideas that we've discussed on vertical integration, it's just another component of what is, in my estimation, a lengthy value chain that requires really phenomenal execution at every point on the value chain. And the 503B pharmacy just adds another unit of efficiency to everything, ultimately leading to more efficient service and lower costs. Hims has acquired now a 503A pharmacy and a 503B pharmacy. And I think they're integral aspects of this vertically integrated, quote unquote, primary care competitor.
So I was going to say, Hims made a couple acquisitions in order to make this possible. Lewis, could you take us through the history of Hims acquisition, specifically with pharmacies, and then anything else that they've done for the business?
So from my understanding, I remember Hims making the Apostrophe acquisition, and my honest perception at the time was that they're just expanding into another product category, with that category being dermatology, and specifically in the case of Apostrophe, acne medications. But from my understanding, what the acquisition actually meant was that Hims was effectively acquiring a 503A pharmacy that would allow it to personalize medications. And from 2021 to today, the total number of medications that are personalized that Hims has prescribed has increased pretty linearly. And that has been a big theme on their earnings calls, the idea that they will continue to create personalized medications. And an example of this that I think really illustrates what I'm saying is I was watching the Don't Die gentleman who also founded Braintree, which was acquired
Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnson, yes.
Yeah.
He was going through his hair protocol because he shared that he's supposed to be bald, but if you look at him, he has a full head of hair. And his protocol was ultimately, it was a topical medication. Ultimately, it was finasteride. Like, that's what he's using. He's using finasteride, but the way he presented it, and you can watch the video, it's about a 5-minute video on his YouTube channel, and it's like, here's how I maintained my hair. He created a compounded topical medication for his scalp, and it included like biotin, vitamin C, finasteride, minoxidil. It included this stack of medications compounded into one treatment that he applies to his scalp daily. And Hims offers the same thing, and it's chewables. And so we can see the fruits of its compounding pharmacy acquisitions in its multi-function medications, such as its finasteride, minoxidil, biotin, vitamin C, chewable.
I think that roadmap was really just the Apostrophe acquisition was the beginning stages of this roadmap towards doing personalized medicine. Prior to this Apostrophe business, a lot of the treatments available in Hims were single medicine generics. You get your prescription for sildenafil by itself, tadalafil, Cialis by itself, finasteride pills by itself. And shortly after this acquisition, maybe within a year or so, that's when we started seeing, hey, Hims released this new ED mint that combines sildenafil and tadalafil. Then they got the finasteride minoxidil spray. So these things didn't exist on the timeline prior to that acquisition. So I think that really fits along with what you're saying, Lewis, is it was meant not for the skin, but it was meant for that pharmacy and to get their foot into the door of learning about compounding medicines, learning about what can be done, what cannot be done from experts within the compounding and pharmacy world.
Yes, I mean, that's been my perception. And today, I saw stats recently, the number of medications that are prescribed that are personalized are over 50% at this point. I think, I've shared that I think HIMSS, ultimately the experience that people have with HIMSS is that it is a trusted source for medical information. And ultimately, every one of these drugs will have a side effect. But to take it to the next level, to create these personalized offerings I think it's just wringing out more efficiency. It's creating a greater competitive advantage. And it's just another point on this value chain. A lot of this podcast, a lot of this video podcast is devoted to, whether the listener or we realize it or not, it's devoted to just identifying how HIMSS is stacking all of these microservices into one chain of value and packaging that as this sleek, seamless offering. I don't want to get on too much of a tangent, but I just think it's a lot harder than people realize to stack all of these things and to do them extraordinarily well at big scale, and to continue to do it, because as we've discussed in the past, ultimately Roe wasn't able to field a successful female brand. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg of what's really going on out there in terms of who's continuing to execute, who's going to be around in 5 years, 10 years.
So Apostrophe was 2021. Also in 2021, HIMSS acquired Honest Health. Now, my reading of this is that it was an attempt to expand into the UK. Anything that either of you would like to add to that? I mean, as the Discord has noted a few times, there's just very little to glean from earnings calls or transcripts about what's actually going on in the UK. But anything to say about Honest Health?
So I do remember the acquisition. My initial research of the acquisition was a bit confusing, because I think it was the case in 2021 that there was a publicly listed Honest company, and they had an Instagram, and they had all of these elements to their business. So for those that are going to do more research on Honest, there's two different Honests, and I think the Honest I think HIMSS did acquire Honest in the UK, and there's not been any mention of it. And if I remember correctly, there hasn't been really any update on international expansion other than hiring in Canada and a potential push into Canada.
Got it. Is that your sense as well, Dr. H?
Yeah, I think on the Discord, also there's discussions about how healthcare is delivered in other parts of the world, and it can get kind of messy in what's regulated, what's possible. Can the telemedicine be expanded into these other international countries? I bet you HIMSS's legal team and whatnot are looking at all the different international regulations when you have different healthcare systems. And that may explain why there hasn't been much news from that front, is they're still trying to, set the foundation for it. And can they do this legally in a different country? I don't know the answer to that.
Now, earlier last month, early September, it was announced that HIMSS acquired Medisource RX, 503B pharmacy. What's the significance of that one?
From my equity analyst perspective, there's a huge significance. I think it's within the context of this year and the controversies of this year, because every year with HIMSS, there's another big controversy. For those that have been following the thesis, every single year we've had the big controversy of the year, at the end of which we have the biggest free cash flow margins HIMSS has had as a business. But in the Hunterbrook short report, which I mentioned on the last episode, and I would encourage everybody to go read the Hunterbrook short report. You can Google Hunterbrook HIMSS. You can look at their X account. In that short report, a lot of it was centered on the GLP-1 element of the HIMSS business, which I will note has not contributed meaningfully to its total sales thus far. Q3 2024 will be different, but as of Q2 2024, the contribution was very negligible. But in the Hunterbrook short report, they basically laid out the idea that BPI Labs was bordering on a nefarious operation. It was In the eyes of Hunterbrook, in the way that they were characterizing BPI Labs, at best, it was a relatively low quality 503B pharmacy. And at worst, it was bordering on a criminal outfit run by a criminal.
And Lewis, just for the listener who's not familiar with BPI Labs, what is it and what is its relation to HIMSS?
So BPI Labs is, as of today, and it will change as HIMSS 503B pharmacy acquisition gets up and running. But as of today, BPI Labs is the 503B pharmacy supplying HIMSS with, for instance, its semaglutide GLP-1 offering. It's providing the ingredients and ultimately the product there.
One part of the HIMSS value chain that isn't yet vertically integrated.
Yes, and the Medisource RX, the most recent acquisition that HIMSS made, that's what that's all about. That 503B pharmacy is the acquisition. Medisource RX is a replacement for the BPI Labs partnership, which has been a controversial partnership. But I will say, ultimately, it's becoming vestigial in the evolution of this thesis. Like it's not even a part of the thesis anymore as Medisource RX gets up and running. But this directly addresses one of the components of the short report, which was HIMSS is partnering with this, in the eyes of Hunterbrook, borderline criminal outfit. But I'll say that the BPI Labs is an FDA-regulated 503B pharmacy. HIMSS looked at a list of FDA-approved 503B pharmacies, and it said, all right, this one is approved by the FDA. The FDA actually had interactions with it in early 2024, and it arrived at the conclusion that it can continue to operate. And ultimately, that's the partnership that HIMSS made. But again, Medisource RX, the vertical integration of HIMSS' own 503B pharmacy, is going to completely eliminate that bearish viewpoint in the same way that we demonstrated on the last episode that HIMSS is not just slinging GLP-1s haphazardly. There's an intake form that is as comprehensive, if not more comprehensive, and very much based on concrete data as opposed to the fallible intuition of a physician. And that eliminates the other aspect of the Hunterbrook short report, which I'll say I thought it was a very poorly crafted short report by the standards of Wall Street or an outfit like Hindenburg. I mean, it was really atrocious. And at the end of the day, HIMSS is addressing all of the loose ends that they highlighted, potential loose ends, and principally doing that through this acquisition of the 503B pharmacy. So it's the vertical integration's a big part, but I think just gaining control of the ingredients going into the medications that HIMSS provides to its customers the economics are important, but I think just the quality assurance, it's been huge.
I want to move to the final piece of the value chain, fulfillment and distribution. Take us through how HIMSS ensures efficient, safe fulfillment and then delivery to each of its customers.
Yeah, the actual HIMSS system is designed to provide efficient fulfillment of the medicines. People would be concerned about getting the refills on time, which would be the biggest thing. The computer system is designed to have check-ins at the appropriate timeline so that the patient can do the follow-up visit, let the doctor know if things are going well, if they need a dose change. And it's supposed to give enough time to account for any of the shipping and stock, obviously, if the medicine's available and ready to go. Some of the feedback I've seen before is sometimes people wish they had faster shipping. Can you do 2-day shipping? Can you do next day delivery? Things like that.
What are typical timelines?
I've seen it sometimes take several days to maybe a week to get a basic ED medicine delivered. And in some of those situations, a person might want to have it for the weekend, for an occasion or something like that. And that's when they might ask, and can you get this to me in 1 or 2 days? And I don't think it's available or possible at this time. So it's very much we'll have you on a treatment plan and we're going to have this regularly scheduled to you. But, the expedited shipping options aren't available.
What are HIMSS' current logistics partnerships? Do we have any info on that?
So as I understand it, currently they're just partnering with third-party logistics providers such as USPS, UPS, FedEx. I don't foresee them vertically integrating a logistics network. For instance, Shopify, which has far greater resources than HIMS at this stage, tried over the last couple of years with the acquisition of Six River Systems. And ultimately, they ended up selling the logistics network. They just said, we can't do this. It's too costly. Amazon spent tens of billions of dollars on its fulfillment and logistics over the last 30 years. So I don't foresee HIMS vertically integrating logistics, but I think there's certainly room to improve the speed at which they're delivering drugs. And I think just generally as shipping and logistics improves through automation and AI, the time of delivery will decrease. It comes back to the things that I've shared related to how HIMS is going to build competitive advantages. It just has to be around long enough for that to happen, for the shipping times to decline and the cost to decline further.
Louis, do you know why that's not available? Like, as a end user customer, I could easily ship something by priority mail in 2 or 3 days just by clicking a button on the USPS website. How come HIMS can't do that right now?
It's a great question, and I've talked to actual subscribers to HIMS about it. Specifically, I talked to a gentleman who was subscribed to their dermatology offering, and the one complaint he had was that sometimes he would use the treatment too quickly, and he would need a refill before his protocol called for it, and he would have to message them and say, hey, can I get this? And then it would take 3-4 days to receive it. I think that they'll be able to bake in faster shipping over time, but that will require creating greater efficiency through the whole value chain. For instance, through the use of AI and nurse practitioners, through vertical integration of their 503A and B pharmacies, and ultimately continuing to maintain pricing power through their unique offerings and unique execution.
I mean, I've even seen people say, I'd be glad to pay an extra $10, $12 just to have it priority 2 or 3 day rather than, snail mail a week.
Yeah, they don't, as I understand it, they don't offer expedited shipping. They just give one price and you get it when you get it, essentially.
Interesting. An area for improvement. In reading, there's a Substack called Fun Daisy who writes research reports on all sorts of stocks. Recently did one on HIMS. Very thorough. Honestly, one of the most thorough reports I've read on HIMS. There was speculation in there that HIMS would roll out something in last mile delivery, although I think he said it's at least 5 or 10 years away. So certainly not coming anytime soon. But you do see in certain reviews, this product expired on arrival. This product didn't hold up during shipping. Dr. H, how often did you hear from your customers that the quality of the product was impaired upon arrival?
I don't think it was unusually or disproportionately higher than what I would have expected. I mean, we would see it once in a while, but it wasn't like a constant. Every day you're seeing, 30% or something of the deliveries getting delivered with poor quality control medicine. But once in a while we did see it. And once it got to us at that point, I mean, we would just authorize a refill, but it wasn't something that you see a ton of every single day. But it is a valid concern, and we have seen some cases of that.
Yeah. And your sense, Louis, is that to solve this last mile problem, HIMS building out its own solution likely won't be necessary, that they can continue to partner in smarter ways with other players in the industry to get the job done?
I mean, I don't think it's a matter of necessity or anything like that. I think it's a matter of just the unfathomably difficult task of building out a last mile logistics network, which nobody has been able. That's why, Amazon has monopoly market share, has pricing power on its third party marketplace. It's just, and that's why Shopify capitulated and just said, we're not going to move forward with this. And I remember people getting excited about Shopify's acquisition of a logistics network. And I was looking at it as somebody who thinks highly of Amazon and has studied C Limited, Mercado Libre, and Coupang. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, well, in a discounted cash flow model, you can erase the next 10 years of cash flows I mean, Shopify does $9 billion of sales at 50% gross margins. You can be sure you're not going to generate any free cash flow for the next 10 years. And that was my thinking the day they acquired it. And ultimately they sold it a year later or within a year or so. So I think it's just not where HIMSS is going to be. It's not where they're going to develop a competitive advantage. Maybe when we have Optimus robots, but at that point, what is HIMSS business model? It's some kind of all-knowing godlike physician at national scale. That's just, there's no doctors, there's just Optimus robots. So yeah, I don't I'm very bullish on HIMSS, but I don't think that they're going to be able to solve last mile delivery, and they're going to have to partner with third-party logistics networks forever. I mean, it's just not possible.
Well, we made it all the way to Optimus robots. On that note, I think we should leave it there. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.